Welcome back to week 2 of the Draft League Championships. If you missed last week's recap, make sure you go back and watch it to get caught up. We had some really close games that you do not want to miss, and that trend continues as we look at our week 2 results. I'm once again joined by BP to go over this week's battles.
Glad to be back, Vortex. And like you said, we are continuing to have some great games here in the DLC that we are very excited to share. Last week, we saw Paldea United fire the first shot by securing week 1 with a convincing 4-1 victory. Now it's time to see if the VDL learned from their mistakes last week to even up the score, or if Paldea United will continue the momentum and pick up another win this week.
Before we recap our matchups, we have a few free agency transactions from the VDL, specifically Tom this week. So let's take a look at his updated team. We can see that Tom has dropped Komala, Pheasantipity, and his Terra Captain, Probopass, now adding Registeel, Dockspun, and a replacement Terra Captain in Thwacky, who can Terra into a Grass, Water, or Steel type.
Tom also continued the changes to his roster by changing Entei's Terra options of Grass to Fairy. When asked about his thought process on these changes, Tom said that he has pivoted away from his original draft plan of status spreading and now be focusing more on an offensive build, with hopes that drafting Registeel will help aid in his team's weaknesses. With Tom now having a terrain setting combo with Sneasler and some new defensive utility to his team, he looks to bounce back from the loss last week and show Paldea United what the VDL can do.
Taking a look at this week's matchups, we have myself versus Techno, Starry versus Cutie, Matt versus AP, Tom versus Jake, and Tog versus BP. Like we said earlier, Paldea United showed last week that they are bringing their best to these matchups, and now it's time to see how the VDL look to respond going into week 2, starting with my game against Techno.
We see this week Vortex decided to not bring Sun, instead bringing Vikavolt and Quillfish off the bench for the first time. Techno looked to replicate his success from last week with bringing his main core team focusing on Hitmonlee's Unburdened Sweep enabled by Rillaboom. Techno made an aggressive play right off the bat by clicking U-turn on Ogerpon as Vortex attempted to set up a substitute. Vortex then sends out Goodra and after an exchange of knockoffs begins setting up acid armors, looking to become an unkillable wall. Seeing that Rillaboom cannot break this, Techno swaps into Galarian Slowking. After an unfortunate miss with Focus Blast, Techno is forced to pivot between Slowking and Rillaboom. Techno attempts to wear down Goodra over the course of several turns, but ultimately loses the exchange with Rillaboom going down to a body press. Seeing his last opportunity to utilize his Grassy Seed strategy, Techno sends in Hitmonlee, but unfortunately Goodra is too set up at this point and only does a small chip to Goodra with close combat, while going down to body press in return. Tatsugiri manages to take down Goodra with a Draco Meteor, but now Techno is very much in the back. It's at this point we see Vortex brought a sub-seed variant of Ogerpon and begins wearing down the rest of Techno's team. Techno does his best to break the set, but has nothing left in his arsenal to do so. Vortex continues to sit behind sub, setting up a leech seed on Techno's switch-ins, fitting attacks in between. With another set catching Techno off guard, the game looks all over. Techno loses both Colossal and Tatsugiri to Ivy Cudgel and Grassy Glide, and lastly Slowking to a critical hit Ivy Cudgel. At this point, Techno has lost all but Ursaluna, managing to knock out Ogerpon, but being hit again with Leech Seed in return. To be safe, Vortex sends out Screamtail to set up a light screen to ensure Vikavolt can live a Blood Moon, then swapping in to knock out Ursaluna with an Energy Ball, winning Game 1 for the VDL. We caught up with Techno after the game to get his thoughts on his performance, so let's hear from him now. Definitely a tough game to start off week 1 for Paldea United. Techno, thanks for joining us. Why don't you give everyone a quick introduction of yourself and your history with Draft, as well as Paldea United?
All right. What's up, guys? My name's Techno. So I started draft probably around I think 2016, and I've been playing pretty consistently since then. So I would consider myself a vet for Paldea United. I think I joined for like season two. I joined for one season and I did pretty good.
You joined for one season and you won one season, so definitely happy to have you as part of the team. Talk to us a little bit about your game plan going into week 2. What was your strategy, and did everything pan out as you expected?
All right, so I was playing what looked to be a Sun team. So my main thing was to, focus on his son. He had Pokemon like Walking Wake, so that was like my main focus. And with that in mind, I built a team that I thought would handle the Walking Wake and be able to out offense the Sun instead of trying to wall it.
So you said you were prepping more for the Sun and Walking Wake, so I'm assuming Acid Armor Goodra was something you weren't expecting?
Yeah, it was not something that I thought was going to be a threat. I didn't really consider it at all during prep, to be honest.
And in the actual battle, what were your thoughts about playing around that? How were you trying to deal with it?
So I know you said it, you sent it out like pretty early, and as soon as you got a body or iron defense or two up, I looked at my team and I kind of realized I was in trouble. So I was almost defeated at that point, I felt like. So I just started kind of just attacking it as hard as I could, fast as I could. And yeah, it took like 2.5 mons down with it. So yeah, put in a lot of work against me.
And then once you saw that the Ogre Pump was a sub-seed set, did you still have any way to play around it? Like, was that the set you were prepared for, or was this just another unexpected thing that I brought?
Yeah, that was another set, or the sub seed I was not expecting. Truth be told, like I was planning on using my colossal to wall the ogre pawn with flash fire, but I actually forgot about it having mold breaker, so that also affected it. And the sub seed was definitely annoying too. It kept, using seed and getting recovery off of me. So yeah, some good sets, good prep.
The VDL definitely looked to retaliate this week and started off strong. Techno, thanks for joining us. Let's go ahead and take a look at Game 2, Starry versus AP. QD leads off with her Shifu, outspeeding the Jirachi and clicking U-turn, while Jirachi sets up a Calm Mind. Zarud comes in to disrupt Starry's Calm Mind setup with an Encore, forcing Starry to switch out.
Jolteon comes out and then barely tanks a knockoff and loses its Flame Orb. Cutie swaps into Scizor and finishes Jolteon with a Bullet Punch. Starry then sends out Samurott to begin setting up spikes and hitting Ceaseless Edge on Urshifu.
Jirachi and Scizor both come back out, and we see that QT brought a defensive set this week with Defog to get rid of Starry's hazards. A knockoff from Scizor brings Jirachi low, and Starry swaps into Great Tusk.
Starry brought a speed-boosted bulk-up Tusk this week and begins boosting on the switch into Urshifu. We confirm that Urshifu is scarfed, outspeeding, and just missing out on the knockout, while also surviving a headlong rush as well.
Starry sacks Tusk to get a clean switch back into Samurott, easily taking another Surging Strikes and revenge killing with Ceaseless Edge to get another layer of spikes back up.
Cutie sends in his Terra Fairy Meloetta and finishes off Jirachi on the switch-in with Alluring Voice to leave Starry at a 5-3 disadvantage. Enamorous comes out and hits Meloetta with a Moonblast to drop its special attack, while Cutie begins setting up himself with Calm Mind.
QD continues to set up Calm Minds. Starry attempts to counter by dropping Meloetta's special attack with Mystical Fire. It's at this point we see a huge team building error from Starry, who kept Enamorous's contrary ability and weakened himself using Calm Mind.
Samurott comes in but is unfortunately outsped and knocked out to an Alluring Voice. Starry sends in Lycanroc to Terra and hit a big Terra Blast. After an exchange of hits, both Lycanroc and Meloetta go down after Starry takes Life Orb Recoil.
QD looked to end the game with Bullet Punch, but Enamorous actually packed up a Berry and knocks out Scizor with Mystical Fire. Spectrier comes out to finish the game 3-0 in favor of QD. QD ties up the score 1-1, and now we're going into our next game with AP versus Matt.
With the score being tied, both teams are counting on their respective coaches for a big win. AP looks to pressure Matt immediately, with Roaring Moon knocking out Empoleon on turn 2, but losing its Choice Band.
Needing to better take on Moon's attacks, Matt sets up Reflect, while AP takes the opportunity to activate Gliscor's Toxic Orb, then swaps to Clefable, with the exchange of swaps ending with Golden Go and Raging Bolt both hitting the field.
AP sends in Gliscor on a substitute from Raging Bolt, but fearing massive damage from Draco Meteor, decides to swap in Clefable. AP now has to sacrifice Clef to Thunderbolt to take care of the sub with Moonblast. After sacking Clef, Espeon comes out to Terra Fairy and hit a Draining Kiss for half before getting an unlucky para on another T-Bolt.
Gliscor finishes off Bolt with an Earthquake, then AP swaps back into Espeon on a Nightshade from Deoxys. Roaring Moon hits a U-turn on Deoxys, sending Golden Go back in, while Matt brings out Salazzle on a Teleport.
Matt uses Overheat as AP brings Gliscor back in, doing just over half before Grimmsnarl comes in to set up screens, being hit with Toxic and allowing more spikes to be set up in the process.
At this point, Gliscor's back up to full, and predicting a switch, clicks Toxic on an incoming Deoxys. Unaware of the tech move from Matt, AP sets up another layer of spikes, but Deoxys reveals Skill Swap to flip the Poison Heal matchup on its head.
Unfazed, AP swaps into Goldango, easily taking Nightshades while setting up Nasty Plot. We see Matt make a small misplay, attempting to use Taunt on Goldango, which of course doesn't work thanks to its ability. This gives Goldango a chance to recover for free.
Now at +2, Goldango hits a big Shadow Ball, and Matt uses Teleport to get Salazzle out to threaten yet another Overheat. Roaring Moon comes out to use Knockoff as Grimmsnarl comes back in for a last effort screen before AP reveals Brick Break to shatter the screens.
Cyclozar hits the field to outspeed Moon and clicks U-turn on Earthworm's switch-in, allowing another chance for Salazzle to come out and fire off Overheat, this time taking down Earthworm.
Gliscor can come in to click EQ as Deoxys is sent in, just holding on after toxic damage, and clicks Teleport on Protect. Matt then clicks Terra Normal on Cyclozar and attempts to hit a double edge, but is stopped yet again by Golden Go.
After losing Deoxys and sending in Salazzle, AP brings in Roaring Moon, finally taking down both of Matt's final team members to knockoff, bringing the score to 2-1 in favor of Paldea United. Let's hop right into Game 4 with Tom versus Jake.
With match point again for Paldea United, Jake brings his Rain Core yet again, leading off with Iron Treads while Tom leads off with Glaceon. Tom is quick to send in Ting-Lu while Jake sets up the rocks.
In return, Tom sets up rocks on Jake's switch into Pelipper to set up the rain. We see swaps on both sides, ending in Serena coming in on a high horsepower from Iron Treads and taking an Ice Spinner the next turn while setting up Light Screen.
Glaceon comes out to nearly take out Iron Treads with a Terra boosted Ice Beam, and Jake spins to clear the Stealth Rock. Jake hits high horsepower again on the swap, but goes down in Ting-Lu's Rocky Helmet.
Iron Valiant comes out and prompts a switch from Tom into Dragapult on a Sword Stance. Jake reveals Shadow Sneak doing big damage while taking half from a Shadow Ball, then finishing off Dragapult with another Sneak.
With nothing else to switch into, Tom sends out Sneasler to outspeed Valiant, as Jake swaps out into Muck on a U-turn. The newest addition to Tom's team, Registeel, hits Pelipper with a T-Wave, and then a Thunderbolt the following turn.
Jake swaps in Archaludon after a U-turn from Pelipper, trading a Paralysis to begin boosting with Iron Defense. Ting-Lu is sent out on an Electro Shot, the following turn doing no damage with Earthquake thanks to a Shuka Berry, while Jake is unable to move due to Paralysis.
Ting-Lu sets rocks back up and begins slowly chipping away by continuously hitting Earthquake, bringing Archaludon down to just over a quarter. Jake manages to get a body press off to take care of Ting-Lu, but after being worn down, Glaceon could easily come into revenge kill. Jake sends in Valiant, but Tom then picks up a second surprise kill with Glaceon, revealing to be Choice Scarfed.
Mug is forced to come out, not being ideal for Jake as this is his main check to Sneasler, but does knock out Glaceon after taking half from Ice Beam. The bad luck continues for Jake after stacking Pelipper to rocks. Kingdra comes out to hit a Terra Hydro Pump and misses the Registeel. Even with the para, Jake outspeeds and hits the second Hydro Pump. Kingdra misses the following turn again, being worn down with Thunderbolts, then hits its fourth Hydro Pump, KOing Registeel.
Jake's in a scary position, with Sneasler coming in to click Fake Out and Dire Claw, leaving it down to Muck versus Sneasler. Muck protects to gain a little bit of health, then is able to knock out Sneasler with a Zen Headbutt. With Jake's win, Paldea United secures week 2. We go now to our interview with Jake after a well-earned win. So we have Jake here with us now, and what a difference a week can make, securing the victory for week 2 for Paldea United. Jake, congrats on the win. Thank you for hopping in here with us. Can you give us just a quick little introduction of yourself?
Appreciate the introduction. It's my second league I've been in besides the PUDL. It's actually one run by my friend Reese. Shout out to Reese. I've been in PUDL for quite a while now, ever since I believe season 2. We're approaching season 7 right now, and I was a previous champion of season 3. I know that was a season full of just crazy events and such.
What strategy did you plan for when prepping this week, and what 6 did you expect your opponent to bring?
So my two biggest shooters I know from my first season of draft were on my opponent's team, Ting-Lu and Dragapult. Thankfully, unlike that season, those two powerhouses couldn't actually Terra. I know that was quite a pain. The number one thing I was really looking out for was that Sneasler, so much to the point that we had to create a specific anti-Sneasler muck set that turned out actually splendid for me. As for strategy for the actual week itself, I knew that Kingdra would thankfully be able to punch enough holes through Ting-Lu and some of the other offense, as well as having a Valiant set that would handle all of the various status-based movesets of Dragapult that usually hard counter a lot of teams like that. Additionally, it looked like a perfect scenario for my Archaludon, even though I feel like every week is always fantastic for him. It's just a really broken combination, especially when you can harness the power of rain.
Definitely a very strong and threatening team combination you have. Happy to see it finally getting some work in. We have to talk a little bit about the end of the game here. We saw some crazy RNG against you in this game, which brought it arguably closer than it could have been. Did you feel like your team prep held up well against Tom? Were you worried at any point?
After the 3 paralysis in a row, I was a little bit losing hope, to be honest. I was like, this seems awfully familiar. I had a lot of my last season with my bird team really kind of rock the roost with unprecedented amounts of luck and hacks on my against me. I know in particular, Overheat was like a number 1 enemy for me. I definitely felt like it had so much to do with the outcome of the game. Although, to be fair, Glaceon put in an incredible amount of work. Ice types with Freeze Dry just do like wonders against this team. But yeah, it definitely did impact it. I know I was like questioning my existence after the second Hydro Pump miss, but I was thankfully able to pull through, kind of beat the odds.
Well, congratulations again. Definitely a well-earned win, and like I said earlier, great way to rebound from week 1 into week 2. So Looking forward to seeing what you can do in week 3.
Okay, thank you for having me, BP and Vortex.
In our final game, we have Tog versus BP. While this matchup may not impact the final results for the week, Tog looks to avenge his RNG-filled loss from last week. With both teams looking to scout, we see a double swap on turn 1. On an incoming knockoff from T-Tar, BP sends in Garchomp, losing its Rocky helmet. After a switch into Girder and predicting a defog, BP sends in his MVP from last week, Lurantis, gaining an evasion boost that Tog will now have to play around. Lurantis begins setting up with Leaf Storm, then terrestrializing into an electric type to continue boosting with superpower. Lurantis then takes down Tornadus with a Terra Blast, causing Tog to swap in Hydrapple. We see BP tech Pollen Puff on Lurantis for this matchup, doing big damage and living a Life Orb Earth Power as well. Tog swaps in Sylveon and fires off a Hyper Voice on BP's switch into Florges, preserving health on Lurantis. Both sides use Wish, followed by Baton Pass, swapping into their team's Steel types. Excadrill and Corviknight stare each other down, with the former setting up Swords Dance and revealing to be a loaded dice Rock Blast set. Corviknight easily takes the hit and knocks out Excadrill with 2 body presses. Tog attempts to start working his way back into this game, trying to catch Corviknight with a Fire Blast, but BP continues to correctly predict and goes back into Garchomp. With BP swapping into Hydreigon, Tog sends Sylveon back out and takes no damage from U-turn. At this point, Tog looked to put all of his chances on Hydrapple, passing it wishes from Sylveon to stay healthy to take on the rest of BP's team. BP uses U-turn on Hydrapple to go into Florges. Tog then terrestrializes into a water type, and we see he slotted Heavy Slam this week for big damage on Florges, however continues to be pressured by Moonblast, which he has no real switch into. With Sylveon coming in, both teams' clerics throw up another round of wishes, followed by swapping out with Baton Pass into their MVPs. Both Pokemon are healed up to almost 3/4 health, but with Hydrapple no longer resisting Leaf Storm, Lurantis is able to get set up once again. Hyper Voice from the incoming Sylveon does about a quarter, which then goes down after 2 Leaf Storms and a Terra Blast from Lurantis. In what turned out to be a slight misplay, Girder comes back in, but is no match for a boosted Leaf Storm, and goes down in 1 hit. Tyranitar hits the field again and outspeeds Lurantis to knock it out with an Earthquake, leaving it 2-5. Quaquaval then comes out to pressure T-Tar, providing an easy switch back into Hydrapple, which then does massive damage to Corviknight with an all-out boosted Fickle Beam. Attempting to predict the Roost, Hydrapple's Earth Power fails, and it takes some chip from Body Press. Getting the prediction right on the next turn, Corviknight finally goes down. The final turns of the match, we see Hydreigon come back in to knock out T-Tar with U-turn. It's Hydrapple versus the world. Unfortunately, at this point, it only takes 2 Moonblasts from Florges to secure the win for BP. Another tough loss for Tog this week, making his overall record 0-2 in the DLC. We caught up with him once again after the match to get his thoughts. Thank you for taking the time to join us, Tog. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
What was your strategy going into this week against BP? What 6 were you expecting to see on from his side?
The 6 I were expecting were Chomp, Quaquaval, Corviknight, Moth, probably Florges, and like one of Hydreigon or probably Lurantis. He did end up bringing pretty much what I expected.
And what was your strategy to beat his team?
Plan was kind of just to end out offense. It was like bulky offense because he didn't have the best or the most immediate power. So I figure like a bulkier offense style would have been the best going into this matchup.
Now, on turn 6, we saw that BP swapped his Lurantis in when you clicked Defog with your Girder, giving it an evasion boost. Was this something that you just overlooked, like in prep maybe, or just when you actually clicked the button? And how did you plan on dealing with it if he hadn't swapped out the Lurantis?
Yeah, something I totally overlooked when I clicked it. And the plan after that was to kind of try and poison it with Sludge Bombs, which unfortunately did not work out. But the backup plan was, it was already low at that point when it failed to poison. So the plan, I need to hit it one more time at that point. So I don't think it would have been the biggest deal if it didn't swap out. I just need one more hit to take it out. But yeah, that thing was really scary for a minute. Just through that whole game.
So, Tog, you mentioned that I brought basically the exact 6 that you prepared for. However, looking over your team, we didn't really see the greatest way of removing Corviknight. Was that anything that you had a plan to deal with from the start?
It's Corviknight for my team in general was just really hard to remove. The best Pokemon I had for it was Raikou, which looked really bad into the team, so that's why it did not come. It looked bad into anything that wasn't Corviknight. So I had Fire Blast Tyranitar and Heat Wave Tornadus with Nasty Plot, which both of them would have been able to KO up. I think it was a physical defensive version of it. With a little chip, it would have easily been two-shot by either one of those two.
And that makes sense when you have things like Excadrill and Tyranitar. A physically defensive Corviknight would make sense, so understandable. But that's all we got for you. Thank you for hopping in here and answering a few of our questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
We end week 2 in a scary position for the VDL. Paldea United is up 2-0, and a win next week will win the whole season. I can say that we are not out of the race yet, but it's do or die in week 3. Make sure to come back next week to cheer on the VDL as we attempt to make our comeback, and leave a like and comment down below to cheer us on. That's all I gotta say. See you later. Peace.